Solving equations. This is a review of part 4. Today's lesson, students will solve equations with multiplication by dividing a number on both sides. By doing what? Very good. So to review from yesterday, you have to remember that when a number and a variable are touching, for example, 2 and x, they're touching, right? This means they're being multiplied, or this term is married. X and 2 are married to each other. This is Mr. 2 and this is Miss X. Okay? Now this is an expression. When you add an equal sign, it becomes an equation. Okay? So what do you need for an equation? You need an equal sign. You need a what? An equal sign. Okay? So it says to solve equations with multiplication, you have to divide both sides by the number touching. An example that I gave from yesterday is, what if Mr. 2 and Miss X now are going to equal a number? They're going to equal 16. Okay? So in order to get Miss X by herself, and she doesn't want to be with Mr. 2 anymore, they have to get a divorce. They have to get a what? Divorce. And divorce starts with a D, and so does what? Divide. So you have to get rid of the number. Get rid of Mr. 2. So you're going to divide both sides by 2. You're going to do what? Right. So you divide the left by 2, the left side of the equation, and the right side of the equation by 2. Okay, now who remembers what is 2 divided by 2? Any number, say it with me, any number divided by itself is 1. What did I say? Any number divided by itself is 1. So 2 divided by 2 then is 1. Okay? So now x is by itself, but we have to figure out what is 16 divided by 2? 16 divided by 2. Well, that means how many times do I skip count by 2 to get to 16? Skip count with me, say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. I have how many tallies right there? 8. Right, so here x equals 8. Very good. Now let's see if you remember this bridge map, okay? So this is an analogy, okay? We're comparing two operations and we're saying is the opposite of. All right, so if I say addition is the opposite of what? Addition is the opposite of what? What operation? Subtraction, right? Addition is the opposite of subtraction, just as, okay, we have multiplication. This x is going to stand for multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplication? What's the opposite of multiplication? It's division. Very good. So we're going to make the division sign. So remember, if you have multiplication, you have to use division in order to solve the equation. Go ahead and get that down. Okay, so when you are solving equations with multiplication and division, you need to remember this guy. Who's this? This is Bob's cousin, that's right. And what does he tell us about multiplying and dividing integers? He says, make the face please, on your paper. He says, a negative times a negative is positive, okay? Now you also need to remember that if you start with a negative, okay, and in these problems we'll be dividing by a positive. Okay, a negative divided by a positive is what? It's negative, all right? So whenever you have one negative, the answer is negative. If you have two negatives, the answer is positive. The answer is what? Positive, that's right. So let's go ahead and look at number 1. Write this down. It says 5x equals negative 15. So Mr. X and Miss 5 have been married for a while. And you know what? Now, Miss X decided she wants to be a single lady. All the single ladies, all the single ladies. So what does she have to do to get rid of Mr. 5? How do you get X by itself? How do you figure out what number times 5 gives you negative 15? What are they going to do? They're going to get a divorce, right? And divorce starts with a D. And guess what? So does divide. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Divide both sides by what? Who are you getting rid of? Mr. 5. That's right. All right? So remember, 5 divided by 5 now. Any number divided by itself is 1. Okay? So now you get x by itself. Now she's single. You have to figure out what is negative 15 divided by 5. How many times do we skip count by 5 to get to 15? We say 5, 10, 15. So it's going to be 3. Is it going to be a negative 3 or a positive 3? Let's see. A negative divided by a positive is negative. So the answer is going to be negative 3. Okay? So now we have to check our answer by rewriting the original equation. It's 5x equals negative 15. Okay? So, because 5 and x are being multiplied, you have to use parentheses. You have to use what? Parentheses. Okay? So you're going to substitute negative 3 in the place of x. What is substitution? Remember, say substitution. Putting a number in the place of a letter. Let's try that again because I know you didn't do it. Say substitution. Putting a number in the place of a letter. Okay, so we're going to put negative 3 in the place of x. And we're going to say, okay, is 5 times a negative 3? Does that give you negative 15? What is 5 times negative 3? It is what? What is it? It is negative 15. Does negative 15 equal negative 15? Are they the same number? Yes. So we put a check. Go ahead and get that down. Okay, read number 2 with me. It says 7x equals a negative 28. Okay, so how are we going to figure out what number times 7 gives you a negative 28? What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is divide both sides by the number that is touching x. What's this number? Who is this? It's Mr. 7. So you're going to divide both sides by 7. So you put a fraction bar, and then you put a 7. You're going to divide this by 7, and you're also going to divide this side by 7. Okay? Make sure you do that. Okay, so then you do the operations on both sides. What is 7 divided by 7? 7 divided by 7 is 1. And what does x equal? X equals negative 28 divided by 7. So we're going to have to skip count by 7 to get to 28. Remember how to skip count by 7s? It's my favorite song. And it goes like this. 7, 14, 21, 28. Yeehaw! Oh, yeah, it's been a while. Okay? How many tallies did I make? 7, 14, 21, 28. I made 4 tallies. So what's the answer? Is it positive 4? Or negative 4? Okay, it's negative 4. Why? Because a negative divided by a positive is negative. So, the answer is x equals negative 4. Or is that the answer? We need to check the answer. What's the original equation? It is 7x equals negative 28. Okay, put parentheses around the x. So 7 multiplied by x, what is x? X is negative 4. Multiplying these together, does that give you a negative 28? What is 7 times negative 4? What is it? Is it negative 28? Yes. So we say negative 28 equals negative 28. Go ahead and put a check. Okay, I want you to go ahead and read number 3 with me. It's read it with me. What did I say? I said read it with me. Okay, here we go. It says negative 6x equals negative 24. Okay, is there something different about this equation? What's different about it? Is the number negative? Is this negative? Oh my God, it is. So look, you got a negative on this side. Is there a negative on this side? Yes. How many negatives does that make? What's 1 plus 1? Come on, people. It's 2. You have 2 negatives. What happens when you have 2 negatives? What does Bob's cousin say? He says, a negative times a negative is positive. That's right. So circle, first of all, make Bob's face. Make this right here. Then you're going to circle the positive, okay, at the bottom. So again, when you have two negatives and you're either multiplying them or dividing them, the answer will be positive for you. So what do you have to do? You have Mr. Negative 6 and Miss X, okay? Miss X doesn't want to be with anybody who's negative anymore, so who does she have to divorce? She has to divorce Mr. 6, right? Yeah. So you divide both sides by negative 6. You say divided by negative 6, divided by negative 6. Okay. So what is negative 6 divided by negative 6? Is it the same number as the top, as the bottom? Yes. So negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. You're left with X. Now she's single. That's good. All right, so what is negative 24 divided by negative 6? Well, we have to skip count by 6, right? How many times does 6 go into 24? You say 6, 12, 18, 24. Very good. So it's 4. What is negative divided by negative? A negative divided by a negative is positive. So the answer is positive 4. But let's make sure. Okay? All right, so we're going to put the original equation, negative 6x equals negative 24. Is negative 6 times 4? Does that give you negative 24? What's negative 6 times 4? Oh, okay, it's going to be negative 24. Does negative 24 equal negative 24? Are they the same number? Yes, so put a check mark. The last example with me. Yay, it's the last example. It says negative 5x equals a negative 45. Do you have negatives on both sides? Yes. If you have two negatives, remember, a negative, do this with me. I'm waiting. A negative times a negative is positive. Okay? So, in order to get Miss X to be single, she needs to divorce this dude right here. His name is Mr. 5. So you're going to divide both sides by what? Divide by negative 5. You're going to divide by negative 5. Okay? Very good. What is negative 5 divided by negative 5? Say, repeat after me. You ready for this one? Say, any number divided by itself is 1. Okay? So any number divided by itself. Negative 5 is negative 5. So negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1. And X equals negative 45 divided by 5. Again, this is really talking about 45 divided by 5. Okay? So we got to skip count by 5. Skip count with me. Skip count with me. I'm going to say it one more time. Skip count with me. And say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So there are 9 tally marks. So a negative divided by a negative is positive. So the answer is positive 9. Remember, I didn't put a positive sign. If there's nothing in front of a number, you can assume that it is positive. Then we're going to check this answer to make sure we're right. So we're going to say negative 5x equals negative 45. And then put parentheses around the x. Going to substitute 9 in the place of x. Right there. And you're going to ask yourself, is negative 5 times 9, does that give you negative 45? What is negative 5 times 9? What is it? It is negative 45. And does that equal negative 45? Yes, it does. So go ahead and put a check. Now you're going to try several of these on your own.